The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Colonel Marcus Reed stood frozen behind his binoculars. What he witnessed through those lenses defied everything he thought he knew about marksmanship. 300 yards away, a young woman in standard-issue fatigues sat cross-legged on a worn blanket. Her M24 sniper rifle disassembled before her like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Sarah Chen had arrived at the base just 2 weeks ago, transferred from a classified unit that nobody seemed to know much about. Her personnel file was surprisingly thin for someone with her rank of staff sergeant, containing only basic information and a few commendations that raised more questions than they answered. The other soldiers whispered about her quiet demeanor and the way she kept to herself during mess hall conversations. Colonel Reed had initially planned to observe the morning rifle maintenance session from his office window, but something about the way Sarah handled her weapon drew him outside. Unlike the other soldiers who treated weapon cleaning as a mundane chore, she approached her M24 with an almost reverent precision. Each component was lifted with careful attention, examined thoroughly, and cleaned with movements that seemed more like a sacred ritual than military routine. The colonel watched as Sarah's hands moved with impossible steadiness. She stripped the bolt assembly with fluid motions that spoke of thousands of repetitions, her fingers finding each component without hesitation. Even from his distant position, Reed could see the concentration etched on her face. The way her breathing remained perfectly controlled despite the complexity of the task before her. What struck him most was her age. Sarah appeared to be in her mid-20s, yet she handled the sophisticated sniper rifle with the expertise of someone who had spent decades perfecting their craft. The M24 was not a weapon that forgave mistakes or rewarded casual familiarity. It demanded respect, understanding, and an intimate knowledge of its mechanical personality. Sarah demonstrated all of these qualities and more. As she worked, other soldiers began to take notice. Training exercises continued around the compound, but Reed observed several personnel glancing in Sarah's direction with curious expressions. Sergeant Williams, a veteran marksman with 15 years of experience, had stopped his own weapon cleaning to watch her technique. Even from across the field, Reed could see the surprise on Williams' weathered face. The colonel had served in the military for over 2 decades, had witnessed exceptional soldiers in various specialties, and had developed an eye for recognizing true expertise. What he observed in Sarah's handling of her rifle went beyond standard military training. Her movements possessed a quality that could only come from extensive real-world application under extreme conditions. Sarah began reassembling the rifle. With the same methodical precision she had shown during disassembly, each component clicked into place with mechanical certainty, her hands never fumbling or hesitating over the proper sequence. The morning light caught the gleam of the freshly cleaned metal surfaces as she worked, creating brief flashes that reflected her meticulous attention to detail. Colonel Reed found himself stepping closer, drawn by a growing curiosity about this enigmatic soldier. Her service record might be sparse, but her competence with the M24 suggested experiences that extended far beyond basic military training. The way she tested the bolt action after reassembly, the careful examination of the scope mounting system, and the practiced efficiency of her movements all pointed to someone who had relied on this weapon in situations where failure meant death. The other soldiers had begun to gather at a respectful distance, their own maintenance tasks forgotten as they watched Sarah work. There was something magnetic about witnessing true mastery in action, even in something as routine as weapon cleaning. Reed noticed that even the drill instructors had paused their morning preparations to observe the quiet spectacle unfolding on the training ground. As Sarah completed the reassembly process, she lifted the rifle to her shoulder in a fluid motion that seemed to defy the weapon's considerable weight. The M24, fully loaded with scope and bipod, weighed nearly 17 pounds, yet she handled it as if it were an extension of her own body. Her stance was textbook perfect, but there was something more, an indefinable quality that separated technical correctness from instinctive mastery. Colonel Reed felt a chill run down his spine as he watched Sarah sight through the scope toward the distant target range. Even without ammunition, her handling of the rifle suggested capabilities that went far beyond what her personnel file indicated. The way she controlled her breathing, the micro-adjustments to her position, and the absolute stillness she achieved while aiming all spoke of someone who had used these skills in deadly earnest. The Morning breeze carried the distant sounds of regular training, activities across the compound, but around Sarah, an unusual quiet had settled. The gathered soldiers seemed to sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary, though none could articulate exactly what made this routine maintenance session so compelling. Reed found himself holding his breath as Sarah made final adjustments to her scope, her movements precise and deliberate. What troubled the colonel most was the disconnect between what he observed and what he knew about Sarah's background. According to her file, she had served primarily in logistics and support roles, with only standard marksmanship training noted in her records. Yet the expertise she demonstrated suggested extensive experience with precision shooting in high-stakes environments. Someone had either made significant errors in her documentation, or there were aspects of her service history that remained deliberately obscured. As Sarah lowered the rifle and began packing her cleaning supplies, Colonel Reed made a decision that would change everything. He needed to understand who this soldier really was, and what experiences had shaped her into the expert he had just observed. The morning's demonstration had raised questions that demanded answers, and Reed intended to find them, regardless of what classified doors he might need to open in the process. Colonel Reed's boots echoed against the polished floor of the administration building as he made his way to the records office. The morning's observation had left him with too many questions, and an uncomfortable feeling that something important was being overlooked. Sarah Chen's demonstration of expertise with the M24 had been impressive, but it was the subtle details that troubled him most. The way she had instinctively adjusted for wind conditions that weren't even present, the micro-corrections to her scope that suggested familiarity with specific environmental factors, and most unsettling of all, the brief moment when her eyes had scanned the surrounding area with the calculated awareness of someone expecting threats. Master Sergeant Patricia Gonzalez looked up from her computer terminal as the colonel entered the records office. Her expression shifted to one of professional attention, though Reed caught a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Gonzalez had been managing personnel files for over 12 years, and had developed an instinct for recognizing when something unusual was developing. "Colonel, what can I help you with this morning?" she asked, her fingers already moving toward the keyboard in anticipation of a records request. "I need everything we have on Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen. Service history, training records, previous assignments, commendations, disciplinary actions, if any. The complete file," Reed replied, settling into the chair across from her desk. Gonzalez's eyebrows raised slightly at the comprehensive nature of the request, but she began typing without comment. After several minutes of searching through various databases, her expression grew increasingly puzzled. "Sir, this is unusual. I'm finding references to Staff Sergeant Chen in multiple systems, but many of the detailed records appear to have restricted access levels that I can't penetrate with my current clearance." Reed leaned forward, his interest sharpening. "What exactly can you access? Basic personnel information, current assignment details, and standard training certifications. But her deployment history shows significant gaps, and several entries are marked with classification codes I've never encountered before. It's as if portions of her service record have been deliberately compartmentalized." The colonel studied the information displayed on Gonzalez's screen, noting the peculiar pattern of available and restricted data. Sarah's file showed routine, assignments, and standard military occupational specialties, but the timeline contained unexplained periods where no duty station was listed. These gaps range from several months to over a year in some cases, creating a service history that resembled Swiss cheese more than a typical military career. "Pull up her marksmanship scores," Reed requested, hoping to find some explanation for the expertise he had witnessed that morning. Gonzalez navigated to the training records section, and what appeared on the screen deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Sarah's official marksmanship scores were competent but unremarkable, showing the kind of proficiency expected from any soldier who maintained basic rifle qualifications. There was no indication of advanced sniper training, no specialized weapons courses, and no record of the kind of intensive practice that would produce the level of skill Reed had observed. "This doesn't make sense," Gonzalez muttered, scrolling through additional screens. "According to these records, Staff Sergeant Chen has never been assigned to any unit that would require advanced marksmanship skills. Yet there are several references to specialized equipment requisitions that don't align with her listed duties." Reed studied the anomalies with growing concern. Equipment requests for night vision devices, Range-finding equipment and specialized ammunition suggested operational requirements that went far beyond the logistics and support roles listed in Sarah's official assignments. Someone had either made substantial errors in record-keeping, or there were aspects of Sarah's military service that were being deliberately concealed. "Can you access any information about her transfer to this base?" the colonel asked. "Let me check the recent assignment orders," Gonzalez replied, opening another database. After a few moments, she shook her head in frustration. "The transfer order exists, but it's signed by someone I've never heard of, and the authorization codes don't match any standard command structure I'm familiar with. It's as if she was transferred by an organization that doesn't officially exist." Reed felt a chill of recognition. He had encountered similar documentation anomalies years earlier when working with special operations units whose activities were classified at levels that required complete operational security. The careful erasure of certain details, the gaps in timeline, and the presence of equipment requests that didn't match official duties all suggested involvement with black operations or highly classified programs. "Print everything you can access," he instructed, "and see if you can identify who has the clearance level needed to view the restricted portions of her file." As Gonzalez worked on fulfilling his request, Reed's mind raced through the implications of what he was discovering. Sarah's presence at his base might not be the routine assignment it appeared to be. The timing of her arrival, combined with the peculiarities in her service record, suggested that her transfer might be connected to specific operational requirements that he wasn't being informed about. The printer hummed as it produced copies of Sarah's accessible records, and Reed gathered the documents with a growing sense that he was only seeing a carefully curated version of the truth. The woman who had demonstrated such extraordinary skill with the M24 that morning was clearly more than a simple staff sergeant with logistics experience. Her true background remained hidden behind classification barriers that seemed designed to prevent exactly the kind of investigation he was conducting. "Colonel," Gonzalez said quietly, "I found something else that might interest you. There's a notation in the system indicating that any inquiries about Staff Sergeant Chen's complete service record should be forwarded to a specific Pentagon office. The contact information is classified, but the office designation suggests it's connected to Special Operations Command." Reed felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to form a picture he didn't entirely like. Sarah's arrival at his base, her obvious expertise with weapons that didn't match her official training, and the elaborate security surrounding her service record all pointed to a situation that was far more complex than a routine personnel assignment. He was beginning to suspect that Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen might be at his base for reasons that had nothing to do with her listed duties and everything to do with capabilities that someone wanted to keep secret. Colonel Reed spent the remainder of the morning reviewing Sarah's partial file, but the more he studied the documents, the more questions arose. He decided that direct observation might provide insights that paperwork could not. That afternoon, he positioned himself at the rifle range where Sarah was scheduled for mandatory qualification testing. What he witnessed there would challenge everything he thought he understood about military marksmanship. The rifle range stretched across a wide valley, with targets positioned at various distances from 100 to 800 yards. Standard qualification required hitting targets at distances up to 300 yards, a challenge that separated competent soldiers from those who needed additional training. Sarah arrived carrying her M24 with the same casual confidence Reed had observed during the morning cleaning session. Rangemaster Sergeant Tom Bradley, a 20-year veteran with experience training some of the military's best marksmen, greeted Sarah with professional courtesy but little enthusiasm. Bradley had seen hundreds of soldiers attempt qualification, and most followed predictable patterns of performance. He expected Sarah to demonstrate the same competent but unremarkable skills reflected in her official training records. "Staff Sergeant Chen will start with the standard course of fire," Bradley announced, consulting his clipboard. 10 rounds at 100 yards, 10 at 200, and 10 at 300. Take your time setting up, and let me know when you're ready to begin." Sarah nodded and moved to the firing line with economical movements that wasted no energy. She settled into a prone position behind her rifle with fluid grace, adjusting the bipod legs with precise movements that spoke of countless repetitions. Reed noticed that she made no show of her preparations, drawing no attention to herself despite the growing number of personnel who had gathered to observe the qualification session. The First surprise came when Sarah requested permission to engage targets at distances beyond the standard qualification requirements. "Sergeant Bradley, I'd like to attempt the extended range targets as well, if that's acceptable," she said quietly. Bradley's expression shifted to one of mild surprise. Extended range shooting was typically reserved for soldiers with advanced training, and Sarah's records indicated no such background. However, range regulations allowed any qualified soldier to attempt the longer distance shots, so he granted permission with a shrug of curiosity. "Very well, Staff Sergeant. We have targets available out to 800 yards. Just remember that these shots don't count toward your qualification score." Sarah's response was a slight nod as she settled behind her rifle and began the methodical process of range estimation and environmental assessment. Reed watched through his binoculars as she tested wind direction with a blade of grass, noted the position of shadows that indicated sun angle, and made minute adjustments to her scope that suggested familiarity with ballistic calculations that weren't taught in basic marksmanship courses. The first shot rang out across the range, and through his spotting scope, Bradley confirmed a perfect center hit on the 100-yard target. The second shot followed with mechanical precision, again striking the center ring. By the fifth shot, a crowd had begun to gather behind the firing line, drawn by the unmistakable sound of exceptional marksmanship. Reed found himself holding his breath as Sarah transitioned to the 200-yard targets. Her shooting rhythm remained constant, with each shot preceded by the same careful breathing pattern and followed by minimal movement to cycle the bolt. The targets at 200 yards proved no more challenging than those at closer range, with each bullet finding the center ring with unwavering accuracy, though atmosphere around the firing line grew, tense with anticipation as Sarah prepared for the 300-yard shots that would complete her official qualification. Even soldiers who had been conducting their own training stopped to observe, recognizing that they were witnessing something unusual. Sergeant Bradley had abandoned his casual demeanor and was now watching through his spotting scope with intense concentration. The 300-yard shots continued the pattern of perfection that had characterized Sarah's entire performance. Each bullet struck within inches of the previous impact, creating a tight group that would have been impressive at half the distance. Reed realized that he was witnessing not just good marksmanship, but shooting that approached the theoretical limits of the rifle's mechanical accuracy. "Staff Sergeant Chen has qualified with a perfect score," Bradley announced to the gathered observers, though his voice carried more puzzlement than congratulation. "She's now requested to engage the extended range targets." What happened next would become the subject of base legend for years to come. Sarah's first shot at the 400-yard target struck dead center, followed by 9 more rounds that created a group smaller than a man's fist. The 500-yard targets proved equally vulnerable to her precision, with each shot finding the small scoring rings that most soldiers couldn't even see clearly through their scopes. As Sarah prepared for shots at 600 yards, the crowd had grown to include nearly every soldier on the base who wasn't committed to essential duties. Word had spread through informal communication networks that something extraordinary was happening at the rifle range. Even the drill instructors had gathered to observe, their usual stern expressions replaced by amazement. The 600-yard shots continued the impossible pattern of accuracy. Reed found himself questioning whether he was witnessing some kind of elaborate demonstration, using specially prepared ammunition or modified targets. No soldier, regardless of training, maintained such consistency at extended ranges without years of specialized practice. Yet Sarah's official records contained no indication of such experience. 800 yards, Bradley called out, his voice carrying across the now silent range. Wind is variable from the northeast at approximately 8 miles per hour. Sarah made careful adjustments to her scope, calculations that required understanding of ballistic coefficients, atmospheric pressure, and wind drift that went far beyond standard military training. Reed realized that he was watching someone demonstrate skills that were typically possessed only by soldiers with extensive special operations backgrounds or years of competitive shooting experience. The first shot at 800 yards took nearly 10 seconds to reach its target, and when the spotting scope confirmed another center hit, the gathered crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Sarah's remaining 9 shots at the extreme distance continued the pattern of inhuman accuracy, creating a final group that defied both statistical probability and Reed's understanding of what was possible with standard military equipment. As Sarah cleared her rifle and began packing her equipment, The silence that settled over the range was profound. Everyone present understood that they had witnessed something remarkable, though few could articulate exactly what it meant. Colonel Reed stood frozen in shock, realizing that the woman before him possessed capabilities that had been completely absent from her official records, and that her presence at his base represented mysteries that demanded immediate investigation. The evening mess hall buzzed with conversations about Sarah's extraordinary shooting demonstration, but the woman herself sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating her dinner as if nothing unusual had occurred. Colonel Reed observed her from across the room, noting how she maintained awareness of her surroundings while appearing completely relaxed. Her eyes moved in subtle patterns that covered every entrance and exit, a habit that spoke of training far beyond anything documented in her official file. Reed approached her table with careful steps, uncertain how to begin a conversation that might unlock the mysteries surrounding her true background. Sarah looked up as he drew near, her expression polite but guarded, and gestured to an empty chair across from her. "Colonel Reed, please join me," she said quietly, her voice carrying no surprise at his approach. "I imagine you have questions about this afternoon." Reed settled into the offered chair, studying Sarah's face for clues about her thoughts. Her composure remained perfect, but he detected something in her eyes that suggested she had been expecting this conversation. "Staff Sergeant, I've been in the military for over 20 years, and I've never seen shooting like what you demonstrated today. Your official records don't begin to explain that level of skill." Sarah continued eating for several moments before responding, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Military records don't always tell the complete story, sir. Sometimes there are aspects of service that can't be documented through normal channels." The carefully neutral phrasing of her response confirmed Reed's growing suspicions about her background. Sarah was acknowledging the existence of classified activities without directly admitting to anything that might violate security protocols. Her answer provided information while simultaneously protecting whatever secrets she was required to keep. "I spoke with Master Sergeant Gonzalez about your file today," Reed continued, watching for any reaction. "There are significant gaps in your service history and several classification codes that don't match standard military documentation. Someone has gone to considerable effort to obscure portions of your background." Sarah's eating pattern didn't change, but Reed noticed a slight tension in her shoulders that suggested his words had struck close to something important. "Classification exists to protect operational security, Colonel. Some assignments require that kind of protection, even years after they've been completed." Reed leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to ensure their conversation remained private. "Sarah, what I witnessed today wasn't the result of standard military training. That kind of precision requires thousands of rounds of practice under conditions that simulate real combat. The way you handled environmental calculations, the consistency of your shooting across multiple distances, and the speed of your target acquisition all suggest extensive experience with precision shooting in operational environments." For the first time since their conversation began, Sarah met his eyes directly, and Reed saw a flicker of something that might have been relief. "You're very observant, sir. Most officers wouldn't recognize the difference between good marksmanship and operational experience." The admission was subtle, but significant. Sarah had essentially confirmed that her shooting skills were the result of real-world application, rather than training exercises. Reed felt a mixture of vindication and concern as he processed the implications of her words. "How long have you been a sniper?" he asked directly, deciding that circumspect questioning wasn't producing the information he needed. Sarah was quiet for nearly a minute, apparently weighing her response carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that suggested difficult memories. "Officially, I've never been assigned to any sniper unit. Unofficially, I've been using precision rifles in various capacities for about 8 years. Reed realized that Sarah was providing him with as much information as she could without violating whatever security oath she had taken. The distinction between official and unofficial assignments suggested involvement with black operations or classified programs that didn't appear in normal military documentation. "The gaps in your service record," Reed continued, "those represent periods when you were involved in classified operations." "Some of them," Sarah acknowledged. "There are assignments that don't officially exist, missions that are never documented, and units that operate without leaving traditional paperwork trails." Sometimes the most important work happens in the spaces between official records. Reed felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a clearer picture. Sarah's presence at his base might not be the routine assignment it appeared to be. Her exceptional skills and classified background suggested that she might be there for purposes that went beyond her listed duties and logistics support. "Why are you here, Sarah? What's your real assignment at this base?" Sarah finished her meal and pushed the tray aside before responding. Sometimes soldiers with particular skills are positioned where they might be needed, even if that need isn't immediately apparent. "My orders are to integrate with the unit and maintain readiness for potential tasking that may or may not develop." The cryptic nature of her response troubled Reed more than a direct refusal to answer would have. Sarah was suggesting that her assignment was contingent on future developments that hadn't yet occurred, which implied that someone anticipated situations that might require her specialized capabilities. "Are you expecting combat operations?" Reed asked, though he dreaded the potential answer. "I'm not privy to strategic planning at that level, Colonel. I follow orders and maintain my skills in case they're needed. Today's shooting exercise was simply part of that maintenance routine." Reed studied Sarah's expression, searching for additional clues about her true purpose. Her calm demeanor and careful word choices suggested someone who had learned to navigate conversations about classified topics without revealing sensitive information. Every answer provided some insight while protecting operational security. "The Pentagon office that controls access to your complete file," Reed said. "Can you tell me anything about who they are or what their interest in you might be?" Sarah's slight smile was the first genuine emotion Reed had seen from her during their conversation. "Colonel, if I could answer that question, they wouldn't need to classify my records in the first place. Some secrets have to remain secret, even from commanding officers who have legitimate reasons for asking." Reed realized that he had pushed the conversation as far as it was likely to go. Sarah had provided valuable insights about her background and purpose, but the most critical details remained protected by security classifications that she couldn't breach. He was left with the uncomfortable knowledge that one of his soldiers possessed extraordinary capabilities and connections to organizations that operated beyond his understanding or control. As they prepared to leave the mess hall, Sarah offered one final comment that sent chills down Reed's spine. "Colonel, I hope my skills never become necessary here. But if they do become necessary, you'll understand why all the secrecy was required." 3 days after Sarah's shooting demonstration, Colonel Reed received an encrypted communication that would validate his growing concerns about her presence at the base. The message arrived through secure channels normally reserved for operational emergencies, and its contents sent him immediately to his private office to digest the implications in complete privacy. The communication originated from a Pentagon office with classification designations Reed had never encountered during his 20-year career. The sender identified himself as Colonel James Morrison, Special Operations Coordination Office, and his message contained information that explained many of the mysteries surrounding Sarah's assignment, while raising entirely new questions about what might be developing. "Colonel Reed, your recent inquiries regarding Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen have triggered security protocols that require immediate clarification of her status and mission parameters. Sergeant Chen is a deep-cover operative with extensive experience in counterterrorism and precision elimination operations. Her assignment to your base is part of a larger security operation designed to address specific threats that have been identified in your operational area." Reed read the message twice before the full implications became clear. Sarah wasn't simply a soldier with exceptional marksmanship skills. She was a trained assassin positioned at his base to respond to threats that someone anticipated would develop. The careful obscuring of her service record and the classified nature of her background suddenly made perfect sense within the context of covert operations. The message continued, with details that made Reed's blood run cold. "Intelligence analysis indicates that your base may be targeted by enemy operatives within the next several weeks. The nature of this threat requires response capabilities that go beyond conventional military security measures. Sergeant Chen has been positioned to provide specialized protective services should the anticipated threat materialize." Reed realized that his base had unknowingly become part of a larger intelligence operation that involved threats serious enough to warrant deploying someone with Sarah's deadly capabilities. The timing of her arrival, the gaps in her service record, and her extraordinary shooting skills all fit into a pattern that suggested careful planning by organizations operating at the highest levels of national security. Morrison's message provided additional context that deepened Reed's understanding of the situation. The threats identified through intelligence channels involve highly trained enemy operatives who may attempt to infiltrate your base to conduct sabotage or assassination operations. Traditional security measures may prove inadequate against adversaries with advanced training and specialized equipment. Sergeant Chen's presence provides a capability to neutralize such threats with minimal risk to other personnel. The colonel found himself grappling with the realization that his base was apparently under some form of threat that he hadn't been informed about through normal command channels. The fact that Sarah had been positioned there without his knowledge suggested that the threat was both serious and imminent enough to warrant extraordinary security measures. Morrison's message included specific instructions about how Reed should handle his newfound knowledge of Sarah's true purpose. Colonel Reed, you are now cleared for limited operational awareness regarding Sergeant Chen's mission. However, this information must remain strictly compartmentalized. No other personnel at your base should be informed of her true capabilities or purpose. Maintaining her cover as a routine logistics soldier is essential to the success of the overall operation. Reed understood that he was being given information that came with significant responsibilities. His knowledge of Sarah's true identity made him a participant in whatever operation was developing, whether he wanted that responsibility or not. The safety of his base and personnel might depend on his ability to support Sarah's mission while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. The message concluded with contact information for emergency communication and a warning that chilled Reed to his core. Colonel, intelligence indicates that the anticipated threat may manifest within the next 10 to 14 days. During this period, Sergeant Chen may need to transition from her cover role to active operational status with minimal advance notice. Your cooperation in facilitating this transition may be crucial to preventing casualties among your personnel. Reed set down the encrypted communication and stared out his office window at the base where his soldiers continued their routine training exercises, unaware that they might soon face threats that required the deadly skills of a trained assassin for their protection. The knowledge that Sarah was positioned among them as a hidden guardian was both reassuring and terrifying. He thought about the shooting demonstration he had witnessed, understanding now that Sarah's incredible precision wasn't simply impressive marksmanship, but a preview of capabilities that might soon be used in deadly earnest. Her ability to place bullets exactly where she intended at extreme distances could mean the difference between life and death for soldiers under his command. The colonel realized that his conversation with Sarah in the mess hall had taken on new significance. Her cryptic comments about maintaining readiness and hoping her skills wouldn't become necessary were actually warnings about what might be coming. She had been trying to prepare him for the possibility that his base would soon become a battlefield where her specialized talents would be required. Reed picked up his secure phone to call Morrison's office, needing clarification about his role in supporting Sarah's mission. As he dialed the classified number, he wondered how many other bases had similar hidden protectors, and how many commanding officers remained unaware that their routine military installations had become pawns in a larger game of international security operations. The phone rang twice before Morrison's voice answered, and Reed found himself about to enter a world of covert operations and deadly threats that his conventional military training had never prepared him to navigate. Sarah's presence at his base was no longer a mystery to be solved, but a lifeline that might soon determine whether his soldiers lived or died. Colonel Morrison, this is Colonel Reed. I received your message about Sergeant Chen, and I need to understand exactly what my base is about to face. Colonel Morrison's voice carried the weight of classified knowledge as he briefed Reed on the intelligence that had led to Sarah's deployment. The information painted a picture of international terrorism that reached far beyond anything Reed had encountered during his conventional military career, and the threats targeting his base were connected to operations spanning multiple continents. Colonel Reed, 3 months ago, our intelligence assets identified a terrorist cell planning coordinated attacks against several American military installations, Morrison began, his tone suggesting the gravity of the situation. This isn't a domestic threat or random violence. We're dealing with highly trained operatives backed by state sponsors who view your base as a strategic target. Reed listened with growing concern as Morrison outlined the scope of the threat. The terrorists had demonstrated sophisticated planning capabilities, access to advanced weapons, and operational experience that made them far more dangerous than typical enemy forces. Their specific interest in Reed's base appeared to be connected to classified research being conducted at nearby facilities. The enemy operatives have been tracked through several European countries. Over the past 6 weeks, Morrison continued, they possess military-grade equipment including night vision systems, explosive devices, and precision rifles that could threaten your personnel from distances exceeding normal security perimeters. Traditional base defense measures are inadequate. Against this level of threat, Reed realized that Sarah's exceptional marksmanship skills weren't just impressive demonstrations, but necessary capabilities for countering enemies who might engage from extreme distances. Her ability to place accurate shots at 800 yards could prove crucial if terrorists attempted to attack from positions beyond the reach of conventional security forces. Morrison provided additional details about the specific nature of the threat. Intelligence indicates that the terrorist cell has acquired detailed layout information about your base, including guard rotations, vulnerable access points, and the locations of critical infrastructure. They've been planning this operation for months, which gives them significant advantages over defenders who aren't aware of the impending attack. The colonel felt a chill of recognition as he considered the implications of enemies who had studied his base extensively. While he remained unaware of their interest, the terrorists would know exactly where to strike for maximum impact, while his security forces would be responding to threats they hadn't anticipated. Sarah's presence as a hidden asset could provide the element of surprise that might tip the balance in favor of the defenders. When do you expect them to move? Reed asked, dreading the answer but needing to understand the timeline he was working within. Satellite intelligence suggests they're already in the country, Morrison replied grimly. We've lost track of them since they entered through what appears to be a sophisticated smuggling network. But analysis of their previous operations indicates they typically move within 72 hours of reaching their operational area. You should consider your base to be under imminent threat. Reed felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he processed the reality that his soldiers might face deadly combat within days. The routine training exercises and normal base operations suddenly seemed inadequate preparation for the sophisticated threat that was approaching. He needed to find ways to enhance security without revealing the intelligence that had prompted his concerns. Morrison seemed to understand Reed's dilemma. Colonel, you can implement enhanced security measures without disclosing the specific intelligence. Increased patrols, additional checkpoint procedures, and heightened alert status are all justified by general threat assessments. The key is to avoid creating patterns that enemy surveillance might detect. Reed appreciated the guidance, but he was most concerned about Sarah's role in defending against the approaching threat. Colonel Morrison, what are Sergeant Chen's specific rules of engagement? How do I coordinate with her if the attack develops? Sergeant Chen has been authorized to use lethal force at her discretion to protect base personnel and assets, Morrison replied with stark clarity. Her training includes target identification procedures that minimize the risk of friendly fire incidents. Your role is to provide situational awareness and ensure she has the freedom to maneuver as tactical conditions require. The conversation continued with technical details about communication protocols and emergency procedures, but Reed found himself focusing on the human implications of what was being planned. Sarah would be positioned to kill enemy operatives who threatened his soldiers, and her success or failure might determine how many of his people survived the coming attack. As the briefing concluded, Morrison offered a final piece of information that provided both reassurance and additional concern. Colonel Reed, Sergeant Chen has successfully completed similar protection missions at 3 other installations over the past 18 months. Her operational record includes neutralizing 7 enemy operatives without sustaining friendly casualties. However, each mission has involved increasingly sophisticated threats, and this operation may represent the most challenging assignment she has faced. Reed hung up the secure phone with a mixture of confidence in Sarah's capabilities and fear about what her presence at his base indicated about the severity of the approaching threat. The woman who had demonstrated impossible marksmanship skills at the rifle range was actually a trained killer positioned to protect his soldiers from enemies who might already be moving against them. He looked out his office window at the base where routine activities continued undisturbed, knowing that within days the peaceful training environment might become a battlefield where Sarah's deadly skills would determine whether his soldiers lived or died. The weight of secrets and the responsibility for decisions that might involve life and death settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Reed made a decision that would define his leadership during the crisis that was approaching. He would trust Sarah's expertise and support her mission while protecting his soldiers through every means available to him. The next few days would test everything he thought he knew about command, combat, and the hidden wars being fought to protect American military forces from threats most soldiers never knew existed. As evening approached, Reed began implementing the enhanced security measures Morrison had suggested, knowing that Sarah was somewhere on his base preparing for a mission that might save lives or cost her own. The woman cleaning her M24 with such care that morning had been preparing for war, and Reed was finally beginning to understand the deadly game in which his base had become an unwilling participant. The attack came at 03:47 hours on a moonless Thursday morning, exactly as intelligence analysts had predicted. Colonel Reed was awakened by the distinctive crack of Sarah's M24 rifle, a sound he now recognized from her range demonstrations, but which carried deadly significance in the pre-dawn darkness. By the time he reached his command post, 3 enemy operatives were already dead, eliminated by precision shots that had turned a coordinated terrorist assault into a desperate retreat. Ra had positioned herself in an abandoned water tower that provided commanding views of the base perimeter, anticipating the most likely approach routes based on the intelligence briefings she had received. Her night vision equipment and intimate knowledge of the terrain gave her decisive advantages over attackers who expected to face conventional security forces. The first terrorist died as he attempted to breach the eastern fence line, Sarah's bullet finding its mark at a distance of 600 yards. The second and third kills came in rapid succession as the remaining attackers tried to adapt to the unexpected sniper fire. Sarah's ability to rapidly acquire new targets and deliver accurate shots under combat stress proved even more devastating than her range demonstrations had suggested. Each shot was calculated to eliminate threats while avoiding friendly positions, a complex tactical challenge that she handled with mechanical precision. Colonel Reed monitored the engagement from his command center, coordinating the response of conventional security forces while maintaining communication with Sarah through encrypted radio channels. Her calm voice provided tactical updates that allowed him to position his soldiers effectively while avoiding interference with her lethal work. The coordination between hidden sniper and conventional forces created a defense that the terrorists had not anticipated. Base command, this is Guardian. Sarah's voice came through the radio with deadly calm. 3 targets down, estimated 2 additional hostiles moving toward the motor pool. Recommend redirecting Security Team Alpha to intercept from the northwest approach. Reed relayed her recommendations to his security teams, realizing that Sarah's elevated position and advanced optics gave her situational awareness that surpassed his conventional surveillance systems. Her ability to track enemy movements and predict their intentions was proving as valuable as her marksmanship skills. The terrorists found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't locate while being maneuvered into positions where Sarah could eliminate them systematically. The 4th terrorist was eliminated as he attempted to plant explosive devices near the fuel storage area, Sarah's shot preventing what could have been catastrophic secondary explosions. Her ability to prioritize targets based on the potential threat they represented demonstrated tactical understanding that went far beyond basic sniper training. Each kill was calculated not just for accuracy, but for maximum impact on the overall enemy operation. As dawn approached, the surviving terrorists attempted to withdraw, but Sarah's position allowed her to observe their escape routes and direct security teams to intercept them. The 5th and final kill came as the terrorist leader tried to reach a vehicle positioned outside the base perimeter. Sarah's shot at nearly 800 yards, delivered under combat stress and challenging light conditions, demonstrated marksmanship that bordered on supernatural. Base command, this is Guardian, Sarah reported as the engagement concluded. All identified threats have been neutralized. Recommend maintaining heightened alert status pending confirmation that no additional hostiles remain in the area. Reed coordinated the post-engagement sweep with his security teams while Sarah maintained overwatch. From her elevated position, her continued vigilance during the vulnerable period after combat demonstrated the professional discipline that separated elite operators from conventional soldiers. Even after successfully eliminating multiple threats, she remained focused on protecting the base until all possibilities of continuing danger had been eliminated. The casualty report that Reed filed later that morning would become legendary within military intelligence circles. 5 enemy operatives eliminated without a single friendly casualty. A terrorist operation completely defeated by a single sniper, whose presence the attackers had never suspected. Sarah's perfect shooting under combat conditions had validated every classified dollar spent on her training and deployment. As the base returned to normal operations, Reed found Sarah cleaning her M24 with the same methodical precision he had observed that first morning. Though now he understood the ritual's true significance, the weapon cleaning wasn't routine maintenance but preparation for missions where mechanical perfection could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Every movement of her hands reflected expertise bought with experience in deadly encounters around the world. "The threat has been neutralized, Colonel," Sarah said quietly, as Reed approached her position. "My orders are to remain in place for another 72 hours to ensure no follow-up operations develop, then transfer to my next assignment." Reed realized that Sarah's protection of his base had been temporary, a mission that would conclude with her departure for another location where her deadly skills might be needed. The woman who had saved his soldiers' lives would disappear back into the classified world of covert operations, leaving behind only the memory of impossible marksmanship and the knowledge that guardian angels sometimes carried sniper rifles. "Sarah," Reed said, understanding that this might be his only opportunity to express gratitude for what she had done. "My soldiers owe you their lives. I know your work requires secrecy, but I want you to know that what you did here will never be forgotten." Sarah's slight smile was the same expression Reed had seen in the mess hall, but now he understood it carried the weight of missions accomplished and lives saved in places that would never appear in official records. "Colonel, protecting soldiers like yours is why people like me do what we do. The secrecy is necessary, but knowing that good people can sleep safely makes everything worthwhile." As Sarah packed her equipment and prepared for extraction, Reed watched the woman who had demonstrated that heroism sometimes wore the uniform of an ordinary staff sergeant and carried capabilities that defied conventional understanding. The base would return to routine operations, but Reed would never again look at a soldier cleaning their weapon without wondering what hidden capabilities might lie beneath the surface of apparent normalcy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as Sarah disappeared into the administrative building to process her transfer orders, leaving Colonel Reed with the knowledge that extraordinary people sometimes hid in plain sight, protecting others through skills that could only be whispered about in classified briefings and never fully acknowledged in the official records of a grateful nation.